With so many different guitar speakers available, it's almost as confusing as shopping for overdrive pedals, you know, there's just so many options out there. So anything that helps us separate all these different types of speakers into broader categories is going to be useful. In this video I want to focus on the difference between high-powered and low-powered guitar speakers, what the difference in sound is, do higher-powered speakers only sound good at certain volumes, what exactly is speaker breakup and is that something you want in your sound, and most importantly, how to decide which type of speaker is most likely to be right for you. Just to be clear, I'm only comparing ceramic magnets here, so Alnico and Neo magnets may be a little bit different. And I don't claim to be an expert on guitar speakers, I'm still learning. I'm simply just sharing what my experiences have been in this video. And hopefully in a way that doesn't get overly technical and that some of you might find useful when you're trying to choose a speaker that you enjoy. The first thing I want to get into is understanding speaker breakup so you can decide whether that's something you want in your sound or not. In my head at least, there's two types of speaker breakup. There's one that I'll call natural cone breakup and the other type I'll call speaker failure. Both can be regarded as speaker breakup, but they sound very, very different. What I call natural cone breakup is the kind of natural speaker distortion that, for me, makes guitar speakers very different from PA speakers and hi-fi speakers and stuff like that. Studio monitors and PA speakers and things are very linear in the way that they deliver the sound. They're very honest and true. Whereas guitar speakers are very non-linear. There's this massive coloration of the sound and natural distortion and added harmonic complexity that really PA speakers and things just don't have. Anyone who's plugged their guitar directly into a hi-fi or PA speaker knows how stark and harsh that sound can be when you compare it to the kind of colourful, non-linear sound of a guitar speaker. It also narrows the sound into the mids a little bit, which is helpful for the guitar as well. I'll do some playing and just listen to how kind of brutal and linear the sound can be when I switch to the line out signal compared to the guitar speaker. Quite an extreme example because I've got a bit of overdrive coming from the amp. Here's a cleaner example which is a little bit more forgiving, but that tonal coloration that is related to the natural cone breakup that I'm talking about is still there in the guitar speaker. See if you can hear it. So why is this relevant? It's because that natural cone breakup that colours the sound of a guitar speaker is the type of speaker breakup that a lot of us, including myself, really enjoy. And I find is most prevalent in lower powered guitar speakers. Lower power guitar speakers are generally kind of looser and a bit flimsier, and they're more free to resonate and create these more harmonically complex, colourful type sounds. As you move to more higher powered speakers, things tend to tighten up a bit. Those speakers often have bigger magnets, stiffer cones, and I find the sound becomes kind of harder and more immediate and punchy. They basically start to take on some of the characteristics of those PA and hi-fi speakers we were talking about before, but a lot of the time in a good way. I'll play some examples and let me know which you prefer in the comments, but I'm really enjoying the lower powered speakers for looser, more vintage sounds, and the higher powered speakers I like for kind of tighter, harder, more modern type sounds. Know that the higher powered speaker was a little bit louder in the room. That's often the case with higher powered speakers. I've leveled out the volumes so you can just focus on the tonal differences though. And notice how the higher powered speaker sounds a little bit cleaner as well. The other type of speaker breakup is what I'd call speaker failure. That's things like when a speaker bottoms out. That's when a speaker is given so much energy that the cone almost tries to jump out of the frame of the speaker, and it gives this popping sound, like a sort of sound. Cone cry is another one. That's maybe the equivalent thing in the high frequencies and comes across kind of like a high-pitched distorted howl. This type of speaker breakup, what I'm calling speaker failure, I think it is probably safe to say that it's a sound that most people don't really like. It's not very musical. It doesn't have any relation really to the actual notes that you're playing. It's just the sound of the speaker literally kind of breaking and not doing its job. For me, it's a sign that I either need to turn down a bit and stop pushing that poor little low-powered speaker so hard, or I need to get a higher powered speaker that's stiffer, that can take the abuse that I'm sending it. I won't do an example of these sorts of sounds because, quite frankly, I think it will just break the speakers that I have, so I don't want to do that. So I prefer and would recommend lower powered speakers when you want a lot of that natural cone breakup that I was talking about. You know, a very harmonically complex sound with lots of colour. Dynamically, I think lower powered speakers are normally better at those looser, more delicate tones. They can be open and bright and clear, yet I find they suffer less from like aggressive ice pick highs and things like that. So it makes them really good for like vintage jazz, blues, rock and roll, things like that. And vintage tones in general, because when you think about it, higher powered speakers weren't really available as much in the 50s and 60s. So lower powered speakers just have that sort of retro sound. The speakers that come with the reissues for the Fender Twin and Deluxe reverbs are the high powered 100-watt speakers. Now, if you want a more vintage accurate sound, I think switching those out for lower powered options will get you just a little bit close to the sound of those vintage originals. That does come with a little bit of risk that I'll get into in a minute though. It's also worth mentioning that lower powered speakers use smaller magnets, so they're naturally just a little bit lighter. Not quite as light as Neo speakers or anything, but you know, a bit lighter if that matters to you. They're also naturally a bit cheaper to construct as well, so you can often get them for much better prices than their higher powered equivalents. High powered speakers are what I prefer if I want a very clean sounding speaker. And when I say clean sounding, I don't mean 4 clean sounds. You know, if I want a modern metal or hard rock sound, I'd actually probably go for a high powered speaker because it's quite a neutral tone, you know, and it's tight and punchy, which suits modern styles. So anything where you want a more neutral tone and you don't want the speaker to colour the sound as much, I think a high powered speaker is a really good option. Even in small low wattage amps, I think the sound of a high powered speaker will come through. I've heard people say that, you know, a high powered speaker won't sound great unless it's fed lots and lots of power. In my experience, not the case. I suspect that it has, when people say that, it has a bit more to do with them driving their high wattage amp right to the brink, you know, and that sounds good, which it often does. It has more to do with that than driving the speaker harder. So I say if you know you want to use a low wattage amp with a high powered speaker, go right ahead. A high powered speaker always sounds like a high powered speaker to me. If you want a really reliable speaker for regular gigging or touring, then high powered speakers are a good idea. I think that's at least partly why those, you know, Fender Twin and Deluxe reverbs come with the high powered C12K speakers. Super reliable, and if you do go for those lower powered options that I mentioned before, then bear in mind if you're pushing your amp really hard every night, there's going to be a higher chance that you could either blow a speaker or you might run into those less desirable forms of speaker breakup, cone cry, bottoming out, stuff like that. Also, if you have a powerful high wattage head that you want to use with a small compact cab, you can do that now with high powered speakers. There's things like the Celestion 150-watt Redback, which is a high powered version of their G12 speaker. And in theory, you would be able to match that with like a 100-watt plexi head and just have a little 1x12 cab, which I think is pretty cool, you know. But if you just have to have those lower powered speakers, then the only way to raise the power handling on those is to add more speakers. So that's really where the traditional 4x12 cab comes in. Now, after going through all that, there are exceptions. So far, I've just been using the reissue Jensen speakers from their vintage line. Those are old designs from the 60s, and the C12K is a higher powered version of those that came out way back in the 90s. Newer designs like Celestion's G12M65 Creamback, I find are much truer to the original lower powered speakers that they're trying to emulate. In this case, the 25 watt Greenback. Listen to the similarity in sound between these two speakers. You know, the Creamback maybe has a bit more low end or is a bit tighter and has that mid frequency slightly different. But in the room, it was so hard for me to tell the difference. In that split sort of 3 or 4 seconds that it takes me to switch my A/B switch between different speakers, which is what I use when I'm comparing speakers, my ears reset and I virtually couldn't tell the difference between one or the other. They're very similar volume, and even on the designs you can see they use the same weight magnet. They've raised the power handling in a different way to the way that the Jensen speakers did it. Have a listen and see what you think. I think they did a really good job with the Creamback. The 150 watt Redback, however, I would be amazed if that didn't show some of the telltale signs of a high powered speaker. That thing has a massive magnet on it, and the sensitivity rating on paper at least is really high, which indicates it's likely to be a much cleaner, louder speaker. It's a shame I haven't got one. If you do have one, let me know in the comments your experience with it. But my main point is that you can't just judge a speaker just off its power handling alone. It's just one of the indicators as to what it might sound like. I hope that's given you a better understanding of power handling in guitar speakers, and next time you're purchasing a guitar speaker, it lets you make decisions in a little bit more of an informed way.